We are very excited to jump in for today's webinar, The Battle with Bed Bugs and How to Mitigate Your Risk and Win the Fight. As an expert in pest elimination, Ecolab is hosting this live event to help businesses like yours stay pest-free, especially as holiday travel picks up. We believe our proven science can help you win the fight against bed bugs. As we dive in, I would like to note that all phone lines and audio are going to be muted during today's webinars. If you do have a question, please type it into the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen called Q&A. We will answer questions during our open Q&A to end today's webinar. Here's an overview of today's agenda. We're going to begin by talking about recent media attention on bed bugs. We'll move on to highlight the biology and public health significance of bed bugs and the ways that you can mitigate your future risk of bed bug incidents. And finally, we'll share what an effective partnership looks like between property managers and pest management providers in your fight against bed bugs. It will be after this that we're going to open up our session with that Q&A that I mentioned on the previous slide. We will take time to answer your questions with our experts on the line. As a reminder, use that Q&A button to submit your questions throughout today's webinar. I would now like to take this time to introduce our speakers. Maddie Lee is Ecolab's Pest Eliminations Assistant Marketing Manager, and she manages our hospitality businesses, including hotels, vacation resorts, cruise ships, as well as healthcare businesses such as long-term care and acute care facilities. She will be taking us through the news on bed bugs, your risk to your business, and the key role for a property manager to be effective. Morgan Manderfield is also joining us today. She is a senior entomologist on Ecolab Pest Elimination's research and development team. She has a master's degree in entomology from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and is a board-certified entomologist. In her current role, Morgan serves on a team of scientists that focus on developing and commercializing new innovations and science-based protocols. She will highlight bedbug biology, bedbug treatment options, and risk mitigation. From here, I'm going to turn it over to Maddie to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley, for the introduction. So before we get into the details on mitigating the risk of bed bugs, let's first level set on the significance for property managers. So kicking us off, it is Bedbug Awareness Week, and it's the beginning of peak bedbug season in North America. This is a great week to take time to educate yourselves on these pests. And so we typically see a rise in activity from June to October, really associated with a lot of summer travel. So again, a great time to educate yourself on bedbug behavior, detection, and potential treatment strategies. And so looking at what's expected for summer travel in North America this upcoming summer, experts are predicting an increase across several aspects of travel. So first, they're predicting a 5% increase of Americans who plan to stay in paid lodging this summer, a 4% increase of American air travelers that plan to fly internationally, and a 6% increase of travelers whose longest trip is going to last a week or more. And so what all of this increased travel means is it allows bed bugs increased opportunities to hitch a ride. And as Morgan will dive into later, these pests thrive in airports, hotels, public transit, healthcare facilities, and even restaurants. And so what all of that means for property managers, there's significant dollars at risk due to bed bug infestations. And so some of those figures we have highlighted here, a single bed bug incident can cost up to $6,000. And as we all know, we're living in an increasingly social media savvy society. A single social media post about bed bugs can potentially decrease room rates by $38 per night. And then lastly, looking at litigation, half of hotels we're seeing have already faced some kind of bed bug litigation with cost nearing around $20,000. So there are significant dollars at risk, and also brand reputation as well. So then looking at the role for property managers, what does that mean? Property managers play a huge role in mitigating bed bug risk. It's critical to protecting the property and the brand. And the three most important actions a property manager can take are educating staff and employees, minimizing harborage areas, and then lastly, partnering with a pest professional. Um, a pest professional can help demonstrate your due diligence as a property manager if bed bug activity is identified. Um, they can help with inspection, treatment, follow-up treatments, and proper documentation. So, with all of that, I will pass it to Morgan to dive a little bit deeper into biology and behavior.
Morgan,
Mhm.
you are on mute.
Thank you so much. I apologize for that. So let's go back a few steps, right? We're going to talk about bedbug and biology, the basics here. Size and appearance, right? The most important question, what do bedbugs look like? What am I looking for? So as you can see on the left side of the screen here, we have a bedbug egg. It's tiny. It's about 1 millimeter long and white. It looks like a teeny tiny grain of rice. Upon first hatching, that nymph, that baby bedbug, is going to be yellowish or tan in color, also about 1 millimeter. And as they feed and develop, they're going to become darker and larger. So the adults are about 5 to 7 millimeters when they're not fed, but once they feed, much like ticks do, their bodies engorge and they become larger about 150% times their original size. They are also nocturnal ectoparasites. So what that means is they are living outside of the body of their host. They're living in our environment, and they're primarily active at night, but not always. So it's true that if you have a very, very hungry bed bug, they will come out at any time of day to feed. But generally speaking, they're feeding at night when we are most still and quiet and inactive, and when we are predictably in our beds. They do prefer human blood, but they don't require it. So they can actually feed on other warm-blooded animals if their preferred human host is not available. They do require blood to survive, and they require blood between every single life stage. So they must feed in order to molt to the next stage, and then feed and then molt and feed and molt and so on. And they go through 5 immature stages before becoming a fully mature reproductive adult. And the life cycle, they generally hatch, the eggs hatch about after a week or so, and they feed approximately weekly. So, if you estimate if a female bedbug enters a room and she lays an egg, that egg will hatch after about a week. And if bedbugs go through 5 nymphal immature stages and they're feeding in between each one, it takes about 6 weeks for a single bedbug egg to develop into a fully mature reproductive adult. So you can imagine that if a female bedbug is brought into your facility and she lays 5 eggs or so, within about 6 weeks, you could potentially have a full reproductive infestation with the possibility of growing much larger. Finally, yeah, you may have read, and it is true that bedbugs can survive for more than a year without feeding, and that's crazy. However, I will say that that statistic and that fact is really dependent on environmental conditions. So bedbugs will generally feed weekly if left up to their own devices, but when the temperatures are lower and the environmental conditions are less ideal, they'll be feeding much less frequently. So generally speaking, in normal conditions, in normal, ambient household or room temperatures, bedbugs are generally not living beyond 3 to 5 months without a meal, but that's still an incredibly long time. So a bit more about their behavior. Bedbugs do prefer to harbor in dark cracks and crevices near their host. So couches, chairs, etc. It's usually within about 5 feet of wherever people are resting. It can be much further, especially in large infestations, but generally pretty close to those resting sites. They are excellent hitchhikers. Fortunately, they don't fly and they don't jump, but they are very, very good at crawling, very, very good at hitching a ride on us, on our clothing and belongings. They do prefer a rough textured surface like fabric or untreated wood, and they are unable to climb smooth surfaces. Now, I will say that what looks smooth to us might actually have teeny tiny microscopic scratches at the bedbug level. And so just because it looks smooth doesn't necessarily mean a bedbug can't climb it. They are attracted, like all blood feeders are, to heat, carbon dioxide, and human body odors. These are indicators to them that food is nearby, so those things will be attractive to them. And after feeding, bedbugs they want to rest and digest. So they will hide and they will return to their hiding spots to digest their meal. And these areas are clusters of bugs where they lay down pheromones to communicate to others to say this is a safe place to rest. It's not a true nest, but it's what we call a harborage. And what it might look like here, we've got some examples. On the left, we've got eggs, we have clusters of bugs, we have shed skins. So you can see a shed skin on the bottom right there, and their fecal spotting. So all of these things together make up a bedbug harborage, and this is going to be a really strong sign to look for to determine if you have bedbugs present. Bedbug fecal material is a liquid, so when it's deposited on a fabric surface, you can see in the upper right there, it kind of blots into that fabric, and it looks kind of like if you took a Sharpie or a magic marker to blot the surface of that fabric, it bleeds a little bit. Bedbugs are classified as public health pests, which is quite interesting because normally public health pests are those established by the Environmental Protection Agency to be, disease transmitters or, really significant in that way. And interestingly, bedbugs are not known to transmit disease. However, they do cause several public health related concerns, first and foremost, of course, being the fact that they bite. And bite reactions can range from none at all to very, very severe, right? You see these swollen lumps on folks here in these images. It can be a single welt. They can be in pairs, in clusters, in lines. You may have heard that bedbugs bite in threes. That's not always true. It can look like any of these presented here. These bites are common on the upper half of the body or the arms and the torso and other, exposed areas when we're sleeping. And a really, really important thing to note here is that bite reactions are not identifiable. And this can be really frustrating, right? Everybody reacts differently, and that's why we can't identify these. So there's no way to look at bites or skin reaction and determine that it was caused by a bedbug. And a medical diagnosis is generally determined by looking at the situational or anecdotal evidence. So even if a doctor says, oh, that's probably bedbug related, just know that that's based on anecdotal and situational evidence. It could be mosquitoes, right? It could be actually carpet beetle larva hairs cause itching, irritated reactions like this. It might not even be a bite reaction at all. It could be something related to an environmental, allergen. The only way to determine if something like this was caused by bedbugs is to thoroughly inspect that room and monitor over time and identify the presence of bedbugs. Now, in addition to those bites, bedbugs also cause general fear and anxiety and impacted sleep and even symptoms of mental disorders. And these are all very, very real. And so even though we can, if a guest comes forward and says, hey, I was bitten by bedbugs, even though there's no way for us or anybody really to know based on that skin reaction that was a bedbug, just know that this is a very real, fearful, anxiety-inducing thing. right? And so we always encourage leading with empathy, right? And validating the guest or the tenant's experience with bed bugs, because this can cause some really significant anxiety. So as Maddie mentioned, bed bugs are not just found in hotels and housing. And I apologize if I frighten you here, maybe put you off to being in public spaces, but it's true that anywhere that people go, bed bugs can be brought there, right? So we have seen bed bugs infest seating in restaurants, and in warmer climates, this can even happen outside in outdoor seating. Of course, they're in apartments and multi-unit housing. But these types of properties can present a unique challenge because these are people's homes, right? These are uh, personal belongings are there, and guests and tenants behave a bit differently and maybe don't want to move their belongings or have very sentimental attachment. So it's uniquely challenging. Further, if it's multi-unit housing, bed bugs can move between units. And so it's very, very important to factor that into a treatment plan. Of course, nursing homes, assisted living, healthcare facilities, these are also uniquely challenging because these tenants or patients, they're often limited mobility, or aren't able to prep their room in a sufficient way that would allow for a really thorough bedbug treatment. So these are all uniquely challenging. Retail and office spaces are also places where we can pick up bed bugs, especially with returned goods, certainly is relevant in retail. And then public transportation and movie theaters. Of course, people travel here, they sit down for extended periods of time. Again, anywhere that people travel to and sit will be at risk of bed bugs. Before moving on, I want to note that it's commonly believed, it's a stereotype that bed bugs are a pest of the poor or unsanitary, or that they're only found in low quality facilities, and that's just not true, right? As I mentioned, bed bugs are attracted to heat and CO2 and human body odors, and if you have all of those, you are susceptible to picking them up in public and moving them around. So absolutely anybody can pick these bugs up and move them from place to place. All it takes is a warm body. So, like Maddie mentioned, we're in a very social media age right now. And so I wanted to pull some of these examples that came directly from Facebook, all related to bed bugs. We've got a couple of examples here on the left-hand side of bugs at retail stores. So these folks are shouting and very emotional about bed bugs being found on clothing in these stores, urging people not to go there. And again, this is a real risk of returns and not having proper strategies in place to mitigate bedbug risk with return goods. The two on the right are examples of movie theaters. So on the upper right there, a movie theater patron is very upset because she was bit up by bed bugs while there at the movie theater, and unfortunately the movie theater staff person was not sympathetic to her situation, so she took to social media to blast that company, unfortunately. And then in the bottom center, I wanted to call this one out. So this is a private group, but it's about 250,000 members in this bug identification group. And this person found what is very, very clearly a bedbug harborage underneath a booth at a restaurant. This is a very heavy infestation here, and clearly that had been going on for quite some time before being noticed. So again, restaurants certainly not immune. And finally, I wanted to call this one out. So this one is a thrift store that took to social media to post that there may have been bed bugs on a piece of clothing reported by patron. And they closed down the entire store and they got rid of every single piece of clothing on the second floor. And they're asking for patience as they build back their inventory. And this is so unfortunate. This really is an extreme reaction to bed bugs, but it's common. Bed bugs are extremely anxiety inducing. And so both the public and business owners often react in extreme situations here. If they would have called us, I probably would have advised not to discard all of that inventory. That would be a huge, huge pain to have to build back up, and really wanted to point this out because even in very challenging situations, most of the time these items and pieces of furniture are treatable in some way, and we'll talk about how. So first, I imagine lots of you are here to help understand how you can mitigate bedbug risk at your property. So let's talk about that. First and foremost is being able to identify the signs, right? What do they look like? So hotel staff and nursing home staff, really, we like to call them the first line of defense against bed bugs, because these folks are in these rooms on a daily basis. If they know what bed bugs look like, that property is very, very well equipped to identify bed bug activity before it becomes an infestation and before guests are able to notice. So performing routine inspections of these high-risk areas is a critical step in mitigating bedbug risk. And especially in hotels, these cursory daily inspections can just be a part of normal room maintenance. So areas that we want to focus on would be the seams and fabric folds and cracks and crevices, because recall that bedbugs love a crevice. They like to get under and in seams and on seating. And of course, looking for these signs: live bed bugs, eggs, cast skins, fecal spots, eggs, and all the signs of a bed bug harborage. You also want to be carefully considering and inspecting what comes into the facility. So limiting the movement of furniture between rooms, especially if there's a history of infestation, is going to be huge, right? We don't want to be moving furniture from a known infested room or maybe an unknown infested room down the hallway, potentially scattering bugs, and into a new uninfested room that is now newly infested. We certainly don't want that. We want to avoid or inspect items that have previously been used. So in multi-unit housing and assisted living, used and dorms and other places where people live, used furniture is one of the primary ways that bed bugs are brought into properties. So educating residents about this particular risk is really critical. Dumpster diving on move-out day in college is something I participated in, but nowadays I would never, because of that very, very high risk of bed bugs. If secondhand furniture is unavoidable, at the very, very least, inspect these items, right? So bed bugs can even be picked up from storage facilities or moving trucks. So even if the original site was not infested, bed bugs can be picked up along the way. In healthcare facilities, we often see bed bugs infesting wheelchairs and walkers and other, personal modes of transport. So these should also be routinely inspected. Limiting personal items on site. I must include this, even though I know that this one is difficult or likely impossible for hotel managers, right? We can't say no to that, right? People do need to bring their personal belongings in, but for restaurants and offices and other similar facilities, we do have the opportunity to limit and plan around personal items that staff brings with them on site. So one option is to provide separate employee lockers, or at least plastic bins or totes for employees to store their personal items, right? Have dedicated space for that. And to be thoughtful about the types of belongings allowed on site. So I say this because I've seen some unfortunate situations where children were allowed to bring into daycares or to schools bedding for nap time. And of course, this is ideal bedbug harborage, right? Pillows and blankets from somebody's bed. And then, of course, this is spread throughout the facility because those kids were able to bring those in. So just being aware of that and limiting those types of items being brought into your facility. And that may be relevant to facilities that have long shifts where staff sleeps on site or rests on site, just something to be aware of. We also recommend laundering linens or clothing suspected of carrying bed bugs in hot water, or placed directly in the dryer for a minimum of 30 minutes, because heat is your friend. We'll get into more of that later. Heat is a very, very useful tool in mitigating bed bugs. Finally, we want to encourage partnership with a professional. Of course we do, for lots of good reasons. But the first and foremost would be having an action plan in place. So what to do if bedbug activity is suspected or positively identified. That means what to do with that guest or that resident, how to communicate internally with your staff members, who should be informed, and how and when to contact your service provider. All of that should be part of your action plan. Maintaining records as well of proof of service. This is super, super important in the event of litigation. And do not attempt do-it-yourself efforts, right? So we'll discuss more in detail shortly, but in short, these methods are largely ineffective and they open up your business to further litigation risk. Lastly, establishing proactive professional inspections and treatments is a great way to truly reduce the risk of introductions becoming infestations and protecting your property in the event of litigation. So there are a multitude of treatment options for bedbugs. And generally speaking, an approach that utilizes a combination of strategies is best, and we'll talk about why. So before that, DIY, do-it-yourself treatments. I do realize that this sounds self-serving, right? This is a self-serving statement coming from a pest control provider to don't do it yourself, call us. But it's true that largely speaking, these methods do not work. And why is that? So store-bought products, they often utilize active ingredients that bedbugs are resistant to. So, because these products are widely available to consumers, they have been overused and frankly misused for many, many years. And so insecticide resistance has built up. And so these products that most people can buy off the shelves largely contain active ingredients that bedbugs have been seeing for a long time and therefore are resistant to. In addition to that, they often contain active ingredients that are kill on contact only. So what that means is they have no residual efficacy, no residual activity, and the bug must be hit directly with that product in order for it to actually work. And recall that bedbugs are very, very good at hiding, right? So if we can only kill those bedbugs on contact and the majority of them are hiding, those products are not going to be effective at actually eliminating that population. Many store-bought products are also repellent, so they contain active ingredients that irritate bugs and repel bugs, but don't actually kill them. And so this causes them to flee to unpredictable places or even to adjacent units, causing that infestation to spread. There's also an increased risk of injury to staff and guests, unfortunately. The news headlines are actually full of stories of business owners and employees and homeowners harming themselves, patrons, or maybe entire structures even, when they attempt DIY methods to reduce or eliminate bedbugs. So as we talked about, bedbugs are panic-inducing and they cause people to make poor decisions based on anxiety. And this is certainly an increased risk that you don't want to take on with your staff or the residents of your property. And of course, they increase the risk of litigation, either from exposing staff and guests to risk, or when it comes to demonstrating that proper and thorough treatment was performed. I just want to call out this this study here on this. Oops, let me go back. On the right-hand side, this is from a scientific journal, and it talks about the ineffectiveness of over-the-counter products called total release foggers. And these are commonly called bug bombs or bug foggers. They're very, very common. They're available on, store shelves at, home improvement stores. And what happens with these is they release vapors from a canister, and it's just enough to irritate those bugs and cause them to flee. So if those bugs are right around that fogger and they're out in the open, they will probably perish. But this study revealed that even a light covering of a single sheet of fabric was enough to shield bedbugs from the effects of that pesticide. And again, bedbugs are very, very good at hiding. They're often going to be in these inaccessible cracks and crevices and shielded by fabric and things. And so mostly these total release fogger products, these bug bomb products, they are causing bugs to move further away and be more difficult to treat and potentially spread that infestation. So that was a lot about what doesn't work. Let's talk about what does, right? Starting with the proper inspection. So visual inspection by a trained professional remains the most common and reliably effective means of bedbug inspections. And these are very generally very cost effective. They are discreet and thorough. And, it always helps to have an expert eye come in and verify suspected bedbug activity. Professional inspections are also very, I mentioned thorough. We get in there and we truly pull that room apart and we flip furniture and we look at every single little crack and crevice with a flashlight, and really, getting in there in ways that a cursory inspection cannot. Canine scent detection is another way that inspection can be performed. So in the same way that canines can be trained to detect drugs or explosives, they can also be trained to detect the unique scent of bedbugs. And this can be pretty time efficient, right? As canines can survey a really large space in a short amount of time. For example, a movie theater. A couple things to be mindful of, though. Studies have shown that canine scent detection for bedbugs can be highly variable. I think one study was 10 to 100% accuracy, depending on the team, right? The canine handler team, depending on that relationship, depending on the training, and even depending on day-to-day factors like environmental conditions can impact the efficacy of canine scent detection. Another thing is that it's less discreet, right? So the public is aware that canines can detect narcotics and explosives. And so having a canine at your property might raise some questions, but of course, that's something to consider. Monitoring devices as well are a great tool because they can be left behind and provide a sort of ongoing inspection over time. And monitors can either be passive or active, meaning they either use a lure attractant, such as heat or CO2, or a synthetic or natural pheromone to actively draw bugs to that device. Or passive, meaning that they have no attractant and they instead rely on the bug's natural movement throughout a space. And so therefore they would need to be strategically placed in between bed bugs, where they're known to harbor and where they're likely to move to. They can also be connected or not connected. And so connected monitors are somewhat newish to the market, relatively speaking. And these are devices that detect bed bugs. They capture them and then they send a digital alert to an app or an email inbox to inform the user of suspected activity in that room, in that particular device. So that's very, very cool, very great technology, but lots of things to consider when you are thinking about incorporating monitoring devices into your property. Things like how discreet is it? How hidden is it? Is it likely to be tampered with by guests? What's the level of maintenance required? So a lot of these have lures that are replaced, right? They lose their efficacy over time and they need to be replaced so often. And who's responsible for that maintenance? Is that your pest service provider or is that your staff? These are all questions to be considered. Finally, this one is really cool. This is DNA or protein swabbing. There are a few products or services on the market which can confirm or disconfirm the presence of bed bugs by swabbing a surface for their DNA or for specific proteins. And these work very similarly to a pregnancy test, or I think many of us are familiar with COVID tests. These, they work by swabbing a surface that you suspect of having bedbug activity, and then that swab is then analyzed, right? And so some of these products offer an immediate rapid result, and you can do it, right in-house. Others require that swab to be put in a test tube and sent off to a lab for analysis. Presently, these products have no way to distinguish new versus old activity, but they are a tool, right, that can be used alongside other types of inspection. Regarding treatment, chemical treatment is the most conventional and widely used treatment method for bed bugs. There are also biochemical options, and these are products that use a naturally occurring or biologically derived active ingredient, whether it's from a plant or a living organism. That's a biochemical option. And as I've mentioned, before, not all of these products are going to be created equal, right? So as discussed, some are repellent to bed bugs, others, might make infestations more challenging by pushing bugs away, by irritating them. So it's important for property managers to avoid using products that are known to irritate or repel bugs, and for providers to understand this as well and select products accordingly. Further, different products are going to be, they're going to have their ideal use case scenarios, right? So a particular product might be better on wood than it would be on fabric or carpet or what have you. And so all of these things your provider should be knowledgeable about, and be able to choose the correct product for that application. Products have different formulations, and that means they are a different composition. We can have liquids, we can have dusts, we can have aerosols, and those all, we call that a mode of action, and those all kind of get at the bug in a different way. They, of course, also have different active ingredients. And as I've mentioned already, insecticide resistance is something that pest providers should absolutely be aware of and be planning for. So which active ingredients in that service program really matter, and ideally a diversity of different active ingredients should be used. And insecticide resistance is a real phenomenon. It's something that is out there. It doesn't impact every single bedbug population, but some populations may be resistant. And so it's important for providers to have a plan in place for that. Residual efficacy also matters, right? So most consumer products are contact kill only, but we really want products that have a lasting efficacy. So when we lay them down and they dry, they continue to work for weeks or months, even after that material has been dried. Follow-up services are also really critical because bedbug eggs are very hardy, and those are generally difficult to kill with chemistry. And again, recalling that they hatch about weekly, right, after 7 to 10 days or so. So follow-up service allow us to go back in after those products have had some time to work, but eggs have had some time to hatch as well. And so you may have some new activity in that room, and that follow-up service will get after that. So there are non-chemical options as well. And I'll note that these are going to be largely useful for soft goods, such as mattresses and upholstered furniture and other items where chemical options either have limited efficacy or regulatory restrictions, meaning like we legally or safely or in good conscience just can't treat them with chemistry. So heat is a very, very common method. This can be either structural or enclosed, meaning large industrial heaters can be brought into a room and heat up that entire structure. Big note here that DIY is just not possible and not recommended for this. There's a high risk of failure with structural heat DIY efforts. There's also contained. So this is pictured here is basically a tent that you can load infested furniture into. A heater attaches to that and it heats up that enclosed space. And a benefit of this is that those bed bugs have nowhere to go. So they are very, very sensitive to temperature gradients. And if bed bugs start to detect that their environment is heating up, they will move to cooler spots, either in that same room or fleeing to adjacent areas. And so contained heat allows pretty much all that stuff to stay enclosed, and those bedbugs have nowhere to flee to. Steam and freezing, these are also some non-chemical options. And just a note, I'm not endorsing any brands here. I pulled these just randomly. These are just some representations of what you might find out there. And these are considered green options. So for when chemicals are unacceptable or not feasible, heating and steaming and freezing are great options. Handheld devices exist, whether that's steam or frozen CO2. And these are effective for many types of objects and furniture, but they may not be able to penetrate deep spaces, right? So heavily upholstered furniture items or insulated items, that heat or that steam is only going to go so far into that piece of furniture. And if anything is deeper within that furniture, it won't be effective. A note about freezing, using a conventional freezer is an option for treating smaller infested items. So these can be bagged up and placed in a freezer. The lethal temperature and time is a minimum of 4 days at 0 degrees Fahrenheit to achieve mortality for all life stages. So if it's warmer than that, or if it's in there for less time than that, you may not see the total mortality. But it's, again, a great option for treating infested items that can't otherwise be treated. On that note, I often get the question of, hey, I live in a really cold climate. Can I leave my stuff outside in the winter to kill bed bugs? And it's an interesting question, and it might work, but it is certainly not a guaranteed method. And I say this because temperatures fluctuate throughout the day naturally, and sunlight changes, right? If something is in direct sunlight, it will impact that temperature quite significantly. And it's just not a guaranteed method. And bed bugs really require that 0 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 days. And you can imagine there are a few places that we choose to live that get that cold reliably for that long. So, and if it spikes up during the day for above the temperature, you are then at risk of not all of those bed bugs perishing. So, an interesting question. Maybe you could try it, but certainly not a guaranteed method. Vacuuming is also a really, really great tool both for professionals and non-professionals. So routine vacuuming, especially of corners and crevices of bed frames and carpet edges right behind the headboard, around the beds. These are great places to vacuum. It's a fantastic way to continuously reduce the likelihood of bedbug infestations from forming. It's also a very widely used tool by professionals to remove bed bugs, particularly during the initial treatment, to get as many of those bugs from the population as you can. And then it's usually followed by another type of treatment to get after harboring bugs, right? Because you can vacuum as many as you can see, but there may still be some harboring. So a follow-up treatment of some kind is certainly recommended. Finally, encasements. So especially designed protective covers for mattresses. They make them for box springs as well that prevent bedbug access. Whether it's, a specially designed zipper or the material itself is something that bedbugs, cannot penetrate through. So these are useful for protecting the mattress from future bedbug activity. And they are a way to help keep that mattress from being discarded in the event of bedbug activity. So these don't eliminate bedbugs. They simply protect the investment of the mattress. And they also make inspections a lot easier by eliminating mattress tufts. So all those little crevices where bedbugs would like to hide, an encasement makes that a nice smooth surface, and it makes inspections a lot easier. Not all encasements are equally effective. Some of them are more prone to ripping. Some of them do not have an effective zipper closure, right? If there's any kind of small gap, a millimeter or even smaller, right, bedbugs can squeeze through. So it has to be a specially designed encasement to be effective against bedbugs. So moving on to a partnership. What does that look like? Let's get into the specifics of what a pest professional can offer you and what you should expect from that partnership. So when choosing a provider, some questions that we recommend you ask are, what is their experience level with this pest? So although many companies offer bedbug services, not all of them have sufficient experience to properly eliminate an infestation, right? Unfortunately, even professional work can be executed poorly. So you certainly want to go with somebody who has a history of success with bedbug elimination. Do they offer proactive solutions? So proactivity reduces the severity and the frequency of infestations, and it also lessens the likelihood of guests finding bedbugs before staff, which of course impacts reputation damage. So finding a provider that offers proactive solutions. We also recommend you ask if they offer educational materials and training opportunities to your staff. So again, property staff are the first line of defense against bedbugs, and so finding a provider that can properly train your staff on what to look for is great. and being able to provide thorough inspections when bed bugs are suspected, right? Getting in there and really flipping that room upside down and looking at every crack and crevice is what is needed. Do they inspect and treat adjacent rooms and common areas, right? As mentioned, bed bugs will travel. And so we want to make sure that we're getting not only that infested room, but looking at those adjacent areas as well. And consider selecting a professional that uses a combination of chemical and non-chemical means of control, right? As mentioned, there's no silver bullet to bed bugs. There's no one size fits all. And so you might have a unique situation. You might have a particular piece of furniture that can't be heat treated or chemical treated. And so you want to have a variety of options available to you. Of course, follow-up inspections, it's critical to perform a follow-up inspection and a treatment as well if needed to ensure full elimination of the bed bugs, right? So bed bug eggs take time to hatch. In that time, we want to make sure that we're going back and getting all of that new activity. Regardless of the treatments performed, you will want a pest management professional that provides detailed service reports and documentation as well. So, with the heightened awareness of bed bugs and the potential for litigation and the readiness that people take to social media to blast companies that have had a bed bug issue, that documentation is critical to support you in the event of any potential challenges that may arise. Getting into the details of documentation, what exactly that looks like, you want a provider that will provide for you the name and date of their service, the details of their inspection, specifically noting whether live activity of bed bugs was found, was it identified, where it was, which room numbers or which common areas. If they treated rooms, which rooms and areas were treated. And just as documenting areas inspected, it should be very, very clear, which rooms they were in and where they were treated, which products were applied. This is required by law from a regulatory perspective for lots of good reasons. And so looking for that specific information on your service report is a good practice. And finally, it should include, any special instructions. So your provider should get in there and provide observations about how you might be able to mitigate your risk. If they're noticing, maybe routine vacuuming isn't happening, they could note that on there for you, and really a customized and thorough report about what sort of prep requirements or any sort of follow-up needs that they recommend. In addition to all of this, many pest professionals will provide a service agreement. And what this does is it outlines the expectations and responsibilities of both the provider and the property. And this is really important to be familiar with these requirements, as it will both inform and protect both properties in the event of any issue, any confusion, any bedbug service performed, whether that's whoever's initiating that concern, whether it's the provider, the property, or a guest. Being familiar with that service agreement will help everybody. We are frequently asked by property managers, how can we be proactive, right? Unfortunately, it's a reality that bed bugs, because of how they travel and because of how they're brought into properties, it is simply not possible for any provider to completely prevent their introduction into a facility. It's just not possible. However, there are tools available to reduce the risk of introductions becoming infestations. And one way to achieve that is with proactive inspections and treatments. And these are more effective when they are effectively, efficiently tracked. So keeping track of which rooms have received a proactive treatment. And, if you're receiving proactive treatments, ask your provider how frequently they service each guest or patient room. So this really should be science-based. And the frequency of the treatment is largely dictated by which products are being applied. So all products have a different efficacy periods. Some last for a few weeks, some last for a few months in ideal scenarios. But in general, at least twice per year is recommended due to product degradation, right? And so new tools are available that allow both pest providers and properties to track the rooms which have been treated, to be able to prioritize rooms which then are due for treatment. So historically, this has been done with pen and paper, or maybe Excel and a vacant guest list rooms. But so these digital tools really help to streamline that process. And so barcodes can be used on each room to minimize the complexity of tracking and provide, nice detailed reports of each of those rooms that are due for service. So this helps both parties strategically target rooms that are due for treatment, and it further offers liability protection. So getting to the end here, I would like to leave you all with these tools. So I want to be clear that we'll be sending out an email at the end of the webinar with all these resources contained within and more. But I do want to call your attention to some of them that you'll be receiving, and I encourage you to take a look. So there's the Bedbug Toolkit, bedbugtoolkit.com. This contains a huge array of resources for training your staff on what to look for and performing inspections. Within that, we have our bedbug infographic. This can be, printed out and posted and shared, so there's constant awareness of bedbugs from your staff. And then we also have our ebook. So this is a really detailed strategy for battling bed bugs and dealing with bed bug infestations in a business, in a property. So check those out. And again, we'll be sending these out so that everyone can have access to these at the end of the webinar. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ashley, who's going to kick us off for moderating our question and answer portion.
Thank you so much, Morgan. This was very informational. I know I learned a lot, so appreciate you taking the time to so thoroughly walk through. We did get a few questions that have come through. The first one, I think you answered the second half, but I'm going to read the whole thing anyhow, just in case you have anything additional you'd like to add. Is it true that if left untreated, bed bugs can colonize and take over an entire space inside of ceilings and walls? And if this happens, how do you best treat to get rid of them?
Great question. So I think I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. If left untreated, so the question is, if we don't do anything, bed bugs can really spread out and just go everywhere. And it is true to a certain extent. So a little bit about bedbug biology, they are very, very driven by their appetites. And so they don't really want to be far from their meals. And so bedbugs will stay close to their host. And we usually don't see that kind of blowout infestation that you're describing unless it gets really, really bad and really heavy. And it's really gone a long time because those bedbugs have to spread out further and further because they just become overpopulated. But in normal situations, where vacuuming is happening occasionally, even we're laundering sheets, it doesn't really get to that extreme level. Bedbugs don't really want to live in attics. They don't want to live very, very far from their host because it makes feeding challenging, right? So what's being described there is quite extreme. It's not typical. Usually we see bedbugs staying a little bit closer to their favorite restaurant, which is us. So. And I'm sorry, was there a follow-up question to that?
It was the second half was just how would you treat in those situations? Sure. But I know that you had walked through several different treatment options. So perfect. All right, excellent. Our next question is, in a clinical setting, if we are using fluid impermeable chair surfaces and draping the chair with something like a disposable or washable linen, I know how to read. What do you recommend for the chair surface treatment process? I know that that's kind of tactical, but in terms of just like the approach.
Fluid surface? Did I hear that correctly?
A fluid impermeable. So it sounds like fluid can't penetrate into the chair surface.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So read that question for me one more time. Sorry, I'm digesting.
That's okay. I know it's sometimes processing. They have a fluid impermeable chair surface and they're draping that chair with disposable or washable linens. What would you recommend for the chair surface treatment?
Got it. Yeah.
process.
So this is definitely when those non-chemical options would come into play, right? So vacuuming, steaming potentially, it would depend on what that chair is made out of, if steam is compatible. Or depending on the size of it, maybe parts of it could be frozen. A thorough visual inspection, depending on how many cracks and crevices it has, vacuuming might be enough. And we also have plenty of chemistries that, well, fluid impermeable. I won't even go there, but
Yeah.
lots of non-chemical options available. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, another one. How can we minimize risk of spreading an infestation to new rooms if we have to relocate a guest due to bed bugs?
Yeah, great question. So this happens very, very often in hotels, right? Somebody comes forward and says, "Hey, I found bed bugs in this room, relocate me." Or maybe you suspect that they have bed bugs and they're requesting a new room. If you're moving somebody that you know is probably carrying bugs with them, how do you treat that space? And so what we recommend is treating any new place that you're relocating that person to as potentially infested. So we would definitely recommend an inspection to that place, that room, once they've left by a professional, just to, get it checked off, right? Make sure that they haven't spread that. A few other options you can recommend or offer to these types of folks is laundering their clothing or belongings in between moving them from room to room, or other, non-chemical options to help treat their belongings before moving them from space to space. That's not going to be a solid option for all cases, right? It's going to be very different for hotels versus more residential type settings where these people have personal belongings. But definitely laundering those clothes can be a really helpful tool.
Thank you so much, Morgan. We have time, I think, for one more question. And this one is a little interesting here, and might need a little bit more context. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, Tarika, but she asked if bed bugs are cited in an apartment, and I'm maybe assuming that it's maybe like a long-term care type facility. Should the occupants of that apartment isolate from others, or can they still do daily activities with others?
See, this is a great question. And, bed bugs are uh, just so highly stigmatized, right? They're such a social pest because we can carry them with us and we can bring them from place to place. And, I think that it is a reasonable strategy to allow that person to continue to live their lives and not, inflict more harm upon them and more shame upon them that they already have by dealing with this bug problem. And then supplement that with proactive bed bug services, right? So understanding that guest or that resident, they're going to be moving into those social spaces. They're going to be, maybe going to other people's units, and having a thorough proactive bedbug room rotation program in place will get after this type of thing, because even if they are spreading bugs from place to place, we have strategies in place to mitigate those risks, without isolating those people and causing them maybe some social stress.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Well, thank you all so much for your time. We are at the top of the hour here. We appreciate your guys' engagement. I know there were several questions we didn't get to. As Morgan mentioned, we will be sending out a follow-up email that has resources and information in it. And we'll take a look at these and can reach out. And obviously, please feel free to reach out directly to us as well. If you would like to deep dive further, we're happy to be here and to be a resource for you. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.